For 30 years, Kerry Kennedy has crisscrossed the globe, leading human rights delegations to over 40 countries, advocating for free expression, women's rights, environmental justice, and more. She personifies our country's most cherished values and has become the face of the United States that fights for justice, promotes human rights, and protects the rule of law. Please welcome the president of the Robert F. Kennedy Center for Justice and Human Rights, Kerry Kennedy.
Thank you. Thank you, Fred. You can call me President Kennedy. Today marks the anniversary of the Montgomery bus boycott, which was led by Rosa Parks. And so tonight we celebrate Robert Kennedy's work on civil rights in our country and around the globe. Robert Kennedy championed the disenfranchised from Watts to the Mississippi Delta. He battled corrupt union bosses and protected Alabama freedom riders. He marched with Cesar Chavez and opposed the Vietnam War. He comforted those who suffered, and he suffered himself. Everything he did reflected his belief in the power of each one of us to bend history and to break down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. And that is the central organizing principle behind the Robert F. Kennedy Center for Justice and Human Rights. Each one of us has a voice that needs to be heard. And collectively, the more we speak out, the more the arc of history will, in fact, bend towards justice. Last year, we began our 6-year partnership with Mexico's leading defender of indigenous rights, Abel Barrera. A few months ago, I joined a delegation from the RFK Center to investigate conditions in the Montana region of Mexico, of Guerrero, Mexico, the poorest region in the poorest state in Mexico. Being indigenous there is like being an African American in Alabama in the 1940s. People live in isolated communities, hours from the closest road, in absolute squalor, with little access to education or healthcare or justice. And few have running water or electricity. Skin color is used to judge people far more often than the content of their character. We met with a delegation from the Maypa tribe, and Abel and his team have been working with them for years, helping them build capacity to demand their rights. In La Montana, demanding rights can be life-threatening. We met with Inez Ortega, a woman who was raped by soldiers in retaliation for her advocacy. And with Abel's assistance, she has worked for 13 years to get her case out of a military tribunal where she would have little chance of justice and into civilian courts. We spoke with her husband, who said he had left their home with Inez and their 2-year-old at 1 o'clock in the morning to walk the 7 hours down the mountain so that his wife could meet with our delegation at 8 a.m. and so that he could make his way to a pharmacy to get medicine for his crippling stomach aches, because that was the closest pharmacy to their home. But the pharmacy was closed. Abel trained 15 of the Maypa men who wanted their children to be educated. So they walked down the 7 hours down that mountain, and they went to meet with the mayor. And they said to the mayor, "We want a school." And the mayor said, "Do you have a building? You got to have a building to have a school." And they said, "Okay, we'll build a building." So they went back up the mountain. It took them a year. A year later, they came back down the mountain, and they said, "We have the building, we want a school." And the mayor said, "Well, do you have desks and chairs for the students?" And they said, "We'll get the desks and chairs." And they went back up. 6 months later, they came back down. They said, now we want a school. The mayor said, but do you have a desk and a chair for the teacher? And so they went back up the mountain, they came back, and they said, now we want a school. And the mayor said, okay, I'll send you a teacher. So a few months later, a teacher arrives who's a part-time housekeeper, barely literate, and doesn't speak the local language. So the group of 15 went back down the mountain, and they said to the mayor, in every region of this country, the government provides the building, the chairs, the desks, the books, and a teacher who speaks the language. We want a school. So what happened? A couple weeks later, all 15 were picked up and accused of murder. One of them spent 2 years in prison. Several spent a year in prison. A few of them spent a few months in prison. And finally, the accuser came forward and said, I recant my accusation. I was told that if I refused to accuse them, that my family would be murdered and I'd be murdered too. But in fact, it wasn't true. So everybody gets out of jail, except there are 3 men left. And those 3 men had actually never been apprehended. So we met with them with Abel that morning. And they said, will you go to the prosecutor and talk to him about our case so he dismisses the charges? And when we asked the prosecutor about the case, he said, oh, just tell them to turn themselves in. They won't spend more than 3 days in jail. This is the injustice, the racism, the casual attitude about the lives of the poor, and the extraordinary danger under which Abel and his colleagues confront every single day. And thanks to the people in this room, the RFK Center is able to work with Abel and his team, and we are doing something about it. In the year since we started our partnership, Inez's case obtained a precedent-setting inter-American court decision condemning the Mexican military for rape and torture, and furthermore, a series of reforms to ensure civilian oversight of investigations of military abuses has been established. Another pharmacy opened the doors for Inez's husband. And now that the children have a school, thanks in large part to my brother Max, who's here tonight, we entered a partnership with the GO campaign to address healthcare issues for indigenous children of La Montana. That is the kind of difference you, the supporters of the RFK Center, make possible every single day. The RFK Partners for Human Rights increases the power and effectiveness of individuals working for human rights on the front lines of social change. We don't just give an award and then walk away, but we form a deep and rich relationship with our laureates. And we are now working closely with Abel over this 6-year period to increase his capacity for success.